everything pointed to Elizabeth as the murderer. But her attorney, her lawyer, defense attorney, was going to bring up the fact that they had found, part of the evidence was they had found blood on her clothing, which she had attempted to burn behind the barn, but there were part of her skirt was still left, and the lawyer said or hinted that he was going to bring up the fact that there would be other reasons for a woman to have blood on her clothing. And so I have this image of there have never been 12 men so fast. It was like, no,
Ew.
we don't care what she did. Just don't tell us about. Just don't say those. Don't say menses. Don't say menstruation. We can't.
Hi, everyone. I'm Don Rooney.
And I'm John Timpain.
Welcome to the musical Innertube, the podcast born out of a mistake.
We once meant to introduce a soothing musical interlude, but we said soothing musical Innertube, and the name stuck.
On this podcast, we talk to interesting people about their interesting lives, jobs, hobbies, and passions.
Difference makers who really make a difference. They used to call me Snow White, but I drifted. If you lean in, will men just look down your blouse? Too much of a good thing is wonderful. It's not that I'm bitter or how I learned to stop worrying about visible panty lines and conquered the world. These and other titles have come from the delightful mind of today's guest, Gina Barreca, brilliant person, memoirist, scholar on women's use of humor, opinion writer. Gina is a distinguished professor of English literature and feminist theory at the University of Connecticut, where she has been teaching since years began with 19. Years ago, I tried to get Gina to be a regular commentary page writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer, but I lost out to another wonderful paper, the Hartford Courant, and their gain was my loss. Today, Gina's with us again to discuss a new collection of essays she has edited and contributed to, titled Fast, Famous Women, 75 Essays of Flash Nonfiction. Welcome back, dear Gina.
I'm so glad to be here, gentlemen. What a pleasure.
Nice to have you back, Gina.
Thank you.
So, Gina, we need to set the table a little bit, and that is sort of a considered pun. Fast, Famous Women is at least the third volume, fourth volume, actually, I guess, in a series. Am I right?
Yes, it was 4 books in 5 years with 300 writers. So it keeps me off the street. Yeah.
Did you know it was going to be a project like that before you leapt into it?
No, absolutely not. It was actually the CEO of Woodhull Press, who does the books, happened to be, we'd like to grow them from stem cells, a former student of mine in creative writing. And he founded the press with 2 friends of his, and it's a wonderful independent press. The books are distributed by the independent publishing group. And so they're everywhere. You can, buy them not only in your local bookstores, but at Walmart. I love having the books available at Walmart. I think that somehow it's like when you want to reach people, you go wherever people are. That's like, how you steal money, you go to the banks. So everybody can buy them. And so, no, this is they're now available as a boxed set. You can get all Fast Women that you want, sort of. Through Woodhull Press and through everywhere that you buy books. But this was in Fast Famous Women, which is the one we're talking about today.
Yes, we are.
Again, I like setting the table because the books, I see them as like dinner parties. That's why I do them, even though, I'm still teaching full time. I got a day job still. And, but I love gathering these writers together and having them sit down and enter the conversation that's been going on for 10,000 years and from their own angles. But this book, the writers had to choose the woman, a public figure, who got them thinking, who settled in their imagination. So it was almost like dealing with 150 people, because the 75 writers dealing with 75 other people. And so it was an ambitious project. And this book, more than any other book, has driven me a little into the boundaries of crazy, because I mean, it's territory I'm familiar with, but there were so many things to make sure that we got right, because it wasn't just dealing with the writers, but we had to make sure that they were getting the details correct about the women that they were writing about, and if there were excerpts, we had to make sure we could use them. And it was a dinner party where everybody had special, somebody was gluten-free, somebody was vegan, somebody was vegetarian, somebody just really didn't, just doesn't like, chilies. And so it was a lot of paying attention.
Yeah, we should say up front that the reason that Gina says that over the course of her 4 volumes that there's 300 authors is because each book is a collection of essays. And the essays are maybe only 2 to 3 pages long, but they concentrate on a subject or a person or something like that, where these people, these writers, give their reflections on whatever the theme of the book is. And it goes by pretty quickly, but on the other hand, there's a lot of meat on those bones.
Thank you. And thank you for explaining why there are all these people in the books. The essays are all 750 words or less. And I've done the book so that for all the collections, that there are basically like setting up a mall. There are anchor stores. So Jane Smiley wrote original.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Books, and she's wonderful. And Mimi Pond, who talk about LA, who's the graphic novelist, the cartoonist, who's got a new book coming out. You should have her on. She's got a new book coming out. It's a graphic book about the Mitford sisters.
Oh, Jessica and her sisters.
Jessica and her sisters, but all of them, and their family dynamics and the political history and the illustrations, the cartoons are absolutely amazing and drawn in quarterly. The really classic book publishers for those kind of books is publishing it, and so Mimi Pond is there. This time we've got Molly Peacock, who's one of the great poets, who's just her recent book. Widow's Crayon Box became a bestseller in Canada, and she writes with Phyllis Levin, who's another fabulous poet, and they write about each other.
Yes, and this is I'm so excited to talk about the book, because people could make of your assignment, so to speak, almost anything they wanted to, and they take it in different directions. And I was very much taken with the 2 poets. I know Molly a little bit. I don't think I've met Phyllis, but and the 2 of them sort of write it together, and it's so wonderful how they even talk about managing the voice of the collaborative project and all that wonderful stuff. But it's also such a great, it's a really great picture of a friendship, not just through poetry, but just a friendship between 2 women. I was very taken by that one.
Oh, I'm really glad. I mean, they talk about how they have met and discussed their work together for decades, and how they always do it over a meal, and that they figure out, even though they're living, if they're in different countries, they've always been in different cities, or since graduate school, and that they treat each other with generosity and kindness. And there's not any sort of line by line critical response. It's a welcoming space. It's the first person who's going to hear the new work, who is going to be involved in it, and it's a way we should all have our friendships. Let alone like the collaborative enterprise between both of you.
Aww. Yeah, except that, I just tell John, do whatever the heck you want. And he says, okay. It goes from there. So yeah, there's a little give and take there.
For better or for worse, I should think.
That's right, yeah.
It sounds like a marriage. I mean, all group collaborations are like the best of marriages. That it is.
And we don't even get any food. That's the right.
That's someone would feed us. It'd be so much better.
Yeah.
So, I think this is one of the very few books. In fact, I'm certain it's the only book so far in my life that I'm going to be recommending just on the basis of its table of contents, because how it's structured, listeners, is that you get an introduction to the person who is writing it, let's say Jane Smiley or Pamela Quinn or Polly Ingram, and then you get a pull quote from the conversation that's coming in, and the pull quotes are delicious. I mean, they are so much fun. I'm going to give you a couple of them, and I want some comment here, Gina, on some of these because this is great. So Leanne Lord has My Angelou, and the pull quote is, as the flight got underway, the phenomenal woman took out her laptop, and the voices said, "Oh my God, Maya Angelou has a laptop?"
It's wonderful. I mean, it's really, Leanne Lord is a stand-up comic. She is absolutely brilliant, and so and the idea of meeting somebody who's been your heroine or sitting next to her on a flight, and then again another wonderful line, not to give the whole thing away, but from the essay is Leanne saying that as the flight attendants come around, Maya Angelou orders I think it was, I don't know if it was
orange juice and vodka.
Yeah, exactly. And so that then Leanne says, "Now I know why the cage bird sings." But there's a feeling of connection, and that's one of the things. And thank you, Jordan, about saying that with the TOC, because I really did. That's something I learned from writing for newspapers. There would always be a pull quote.
Yes.
And that you had to get the reader involved from the beginning, because it's like, what am I going to hear about Amelia Earhart that I haven't heard before? It's a different take on her. This is when she goes to visit Purdue, and in the early days, and is talking about how women have to understand that they're going to have a relationship to engineering and machinery and the new technology. And it's such a wonderful celebration of her at her liveliest, and not just entombed in the mythology.
Yes.
And
right.
The same deal with Eleanor of Aquitaine. It's
I love that one. Oh my gosh, she is so high-handed. Exactly. Oh my goodness.
But she wants to know. She's being interviewed, by contemporary. It's like a women's studies conference.
You are obviously undereducated.
Well, one of my favorites is Queen Maud of Ireland.
Yeah.
Ancient mythological queens, they're just like us. Which is great.
And by the way, if you know the cattle rustle at Cooley, Queen Maeve is...
Oh, yeah, she was a pirate.
Yeah. What? Whoa.
She was a swashbuckler and a pirate.
Hello.
Yeah. And so, John, we got a little bit of that in our DNA.
And she's buried standing up.
Yes.
So that she can face the next battle. She is ready. She has her back turned to England, and she's facing Ireland, and she is ready. She is ready for battle. And
I bet the parts of her hands that are facing towards England have a middle finger out too. But that's just the Irish in me.
That's just you.
One of the interesting things about all these essays is that they run the gamut of people's reaction to famous people. There are people who have met famous people. There are writers who were inspired by the famous people. There are writers who are just intrigued. There are writers that write, some of the essay writers that you have, that write letters to the famous people saying, here's what I'd like to know about you that I don't. So there's all sorts of different pathways towards those famous people. And it's amazing the different paths that these writers take to get to the glitterati, if you will.
Well, it was interesting because, again, I don't put out like really public calls for these because I don't have the resources to read everything that would come, over the transom under the door. But I'm 68 years old. I've been teaching since 1987 at the University of Connecticut. I've been around a couple of blocks, let's put it that way. And so I've got to meet both emerging writers and well-respected, situated writers. And as I was saying, like putting the book together, so I've got the famous writers who are writing original pieces. And then I have a lot of, or I gathered at the table of the books for all of them, but particularly for Fast Famous Women, a lot of emerging writers. And as we know, emerging writers can be of any age. I mean, there are people who are in their 60s who have never been published in a volume with an ISBN number on it. They have been local columnists, or they have written for communities of people, but they've never actually allowed their writing to cross the street by itself before.
Yes.
So for them to be in a book with these people who are the ones who are, marking the pathways and the lanes and saying how you're going to go, is really been fun. So there are people who are writing as the famous woman.
Yes.
Which was a lot of fun. So that, for example, one of my favorite pieces in the book is by Linda Button, and she writes about Lizzie Borden. Now, do you guys know who Lizzie Borden is?
Of course.
Yeah, Lizzie Borden, 40 whacks, gave her mother 41.
Right.
That was a jump rope rhyme.
I've been to her house.
Oh, yeah. Were you invited, John? Did she serve you mother and father?
She had a rather cutting wit, I think. But I was just a hack at the time.
Did you ask her questions, John?
I have to go.
Well, I saw her for a long time.
Oh, okay.
But I love the Lizzie Borden that comes. Doesn't she say something like "Call me Lizbeth" or something at the beginning?
Yeah.
And
she.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that persona of her is so sort of snub-nosed and sort of direct and, shut your mouth kind of thing. It's almost like she's from Brooklyn. It's so wonderful, the persona.
It's a compliment. And it's right, as a girl from Brooklyn. But it's what Linda Borden does is to, again, give Borden, Linda Button gives Lizzie Borden that voice that is very self-assured, that is not the mad woman in the attic or the mad woman with the axe. She's just like and Linda has written a lot of different kinds of work, but she also did business writing, was in a public space, doing PR, doing different kinds of work for companies and individuals. And she brings in the sort of corporate speak, so that one of the lines that she had to say is, well, in terms of her parents, she had to make plans and execute them. And legs back to your, it's
yes.
a great use of a turn on that corporate lingo that is come into play the last few years. But it's a different vision of Yeah. And I think that, so that even, while I hope that people are not inspired by Lizzie Borden and go, well, at least I'm not the first one to do this.
She was acquitted. Don't forget that. She was acquitted.
And you know why she was acquitted? Do you know why she was acquitted? Okay. Because in those days it was, a jury of your peers, but of course it was all men. And so here's this woman whose attorney is presenting the case where it everything pointed to Elizabeth as the murderer. But her attorney, her lawyer, defense attorney, was going to bring up the fact that, they had found, part of the evidence was they had found blood on her clothing, which she had attempted to burn behind the barn, but there were part of her skirt was still left. And the lawyer said, or hinted that he was going to bring up the fact that there would be other reasons for a woman to have blood on her clothing. And so I have this image of there have never been 12 men so fast. It was like, no,
you.
No, we don't care what she did. Just don't tell us about. Just don't say those. Don't say menses. Don't say menstruation. We can't. And then she became like a philanthropist, and she was a cultural icon in Fall River. I mean, she lived in the house, did well, was very much a social, butterfly is the wrong word, but a social magnet, and people not just this curiosity that locked herself up, but in fact opened her doors and said, here I am. You want to talk?
We'll return to our podcast in a moment, but first, here's a soothing musical interlude.
Gina Barreca is a distinguished professor of English literature and feminist theory at the University of Connecticut.
Among her nonfiction and memoir titles are Babes in Boyland, A Personal History of Coeducation in the Ivy League, and Sweet Revenge, The Wicked Delights of Getting Even.
She's also edited the signet book of American humor, the Penguin Book of Women's Humor, and a sit-down with The Sopranos, watching Italian-American culture on TV's most talked-about series.
Find out more about the world of Gina Barreca on her Facebook page, facebook.com/Gina Barreca. That's Cap G, I-N-A, Cap B, A-R-R-E-C-A, or her author page, ginabarreca.com.
And now, we return you to the musical Innertube, already in progress.
Well, and this sort of contributes to one of the themes, if there are themes in this book, and there definitely are, that there are more than one way to be famous. There are more than one path to fame. You have this one, Elizabeth Borden, I'm sorry, Madam Borden, but you also have Annie Oakley, but that chapter focuses, and I'm not going to give away too much, it focuses on just the one thing about her life, which is that she won a big lawsuit against William Randolph Hearst. In fact, she won I think 53 out of 54 lawsuits or something. Yeah. So there's that one focus, and then there's Marilyn Monroe, and the pull quote there is something like, more people have wanted to be you.
More people want to be you, Marilyn, than ever you wanted to be you.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's that's Amy Harlow Sherman. And she is, again, a terrific, very funny writer. And the piece is, again, what happens when you become an icon? You know, what happens when you have this famous persona, right? This other that you become versus the quote unquote real person. You know, but that real person is, again, to use an overused word, like Taylor Swift, is a curated version. And even those millions and millions of people who have made her a billionaire, you know, they feel personally connected to her. But so this essay was written at a conversation between a mother and a daughter who like see Taylor Swift as like the connecting generation between them. And it talks about going to concerts together and how both of them know the words. And they included a playlist, you know, with the essay so that people can find that online.
And a good playlist, I might add.
A good playlist. But it was nice to, again, the way that the writers, so this is why I invited people. And then pretty much there was a lot of, you know, back and forth, as one does as an editor, where you're going, this part is great, but this needs more clarification. I'm not sure that example works, or do you really mean this? But it was great that they all picked the door they wanted to open to get into that room with that person. Did they want to do it as the third person? Did they want to do it as a letter writer? Did they feel genuinely, personally connected to her, or was she just an object of fascination for them? And then the larger issue, of course, is, I just wrote a piece for Psychology Today that got posted yesterday, about how fame is different for men and for women.
Yes.
And so I think that, you know, women, you know, didn't get famous, they got reputations. At least that's how it was in my high school. And then somehow, thank you, it took you a second, but you got it. You were a good boy, weren't you? You were a nice boy.
Alas, yes.
Yes, alas, yes.
I regret it now. I regret it.
We always said he was good for nothing. So there you go. Right there.
And that's how men show affection.
I have a witness. Yes.
Yes.
Well, don't you think, if I may ask, don't you think that in a sense, when men become famous, it's expected. When women become famous, they're blamed for being famous.
Absolutely. What a very good way to put it. And that somehow, and then you have to excuse it somehow. Well, she's only famous because she's beautiful, not because she's talented. Let's go back. Right? Yes. Or, you know, somebody like some of the other folks who were here. I mean, that we've got Rory Monaco talking about Mary Oliver. So this is a woman who's a young poet, but who's inspired by Mary Oliver, but she's like asking for Mary Oliver's help. A lot of the essays are women who are writing about people who have inspired them. And it was sort of, how did you do it? And like, not in a bad way. How did you get away with it? But like, how did you navigate and negotiate public scrutiny? Because it's not just applause. I mean, once people start to know who you are, there's a lot of envy, there's a lot of bitterness, there's a lot of, what did she do? Did she sleep her way to fame? Did, her daddy buy her way to fame? It's not always appreciative. And I think that, and I'm sure men, get the same thing, but they get it in a way that it seems, and this just may be the women's idea of men's lives, that it doesn't get internalized as immediately as it does for women.
Oh yeah.
The minute that you say, okay, let's look at Amy Schumer, who actually nobody wrote about, but she's
yes, let's look at her though.
So that Amy Schumer talks about, like, everybody just wants to talk about her weight.
Right.
Not the brilliant stand-up that she does, the fact that she's willing to put herself out in these movies, some of which are good, some of which are not so good, but that it's, again, this sort of scrutiny where if you keep yourself on the other side of the podium or the platform or the theatrical stage, you get to make all these judgments. But to have these judgments made about you when you're told as a girl, and I like to think things have changed in 40 years, 50 years, that you're not supposed to be competitive. That if you have something, you're supposed to share it. And it's sort of like, so that I remember I was on Oprah a couple of times. So that one of the times that I was on, where she was talking about that people who were fans of hers, who were deep fans of hers, would write her letters and saying, "You have so much. Can you please buy me a house?"
Yeah.
Actually, for you, it would mean nothing. But she actually showed the letter. She didn't show the names. Yeah. And that people feel that they're entitled to a piece of you.
Sure.
Because they feel they have a connection with you. And it's like, you get this much money. How come I can't have some of it? I'm a very good speaker. Can't I be your co-host? Can't I?
Yeah. Right.
It's the old story too about, and men and women get this, if they're well known, if their face is famous, try to go to a restaurant and sit down and have a meal without people coming over. And all you're trying to do is have dinner, and people are coming over and interrupting that dinner. And then if you show the least little bit of prickliness, like, "Excuse me, I'm eating dinner," these people are, "Well, who the heck do you think you are?" Like somehow you owe them something just because they've seen you on television or in a movie or whatever the level of fame is.
Right. And I think that, but the larger sense there, Don, is who do you think you are? That's a big part of it. It's like, I can't remember who wrote about it, but somebody was talking about, when Johnny Carson was the late night guy.
Oh yeah.
He owned that world. But people would often say about him, he's just a regular guy. I can do that. He just sits there and he invites people and they perform. How hard is that job? Why does he earn that money? I mean, that, like, being a host, coming up with this, being charismatic, being generous, being, again, on every night.
Yes.
Having, constructing this universe, inventing this stuff. But it's like, nah, he's just a regular guy. I don't know. He must have known somebody. It's like, what?
I remember reading an interview with him at one point where he said something along the lines of, "All right, try talking to somebody and having a guy just the other side of that somebody doing this, telling you, oh, you're in the middle of a very interesting conversation." He's saying, "Wrap it up. We got to go to commercial."
Right. How do you do it? Yeah.
Well, you guys do it. I mean, you do it without, you say to each other, "Wrap it up," I presume, and at some point you'll say it to me. But, the idea of...
I was just about to say, no, go ahead.
The idea of doing it, under the massive lights and 3 cameras and the cacophony of an audience. And again, everybody has to be the most entertaining person in the world for the 5 minutes that you're talking to them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
That takes a lot of effort.
Oh, it does. And as Shakespeare says in Henry IV, Part 1, has Falstaff say, "Detraction will not suffer fame."
Yeah.
There's always going to be the boo birds, the rumor mongers, the people who try to undercut you. There is a lacerating section about Patti LaBelle
Yes. Oh, good. I'm glad you
Oh,
read
yeah.
that.
Now, if ever there was anybody who was gifted by the Lord above with talent and beautiful voice, and there's no reason to walk up to her and say, "Well, how did you get here?" I mean, it's clear how she got here.
Right.
But the person who is imagined, who is imaged forth in this section, really has an awful lot to say about detraction and about how difficult it is. And it might be more difficult for women. It might just be,
Oh, yeah.
Well, because there were in a way fewer spots, right? You're allowed to be, again, I like to think that all the work that women and men have done in the last couple of generations has made a difference. But you were either like the sexy one, the smart one, the comfy one, the sweet one. So there were only a number of spaces that could be occupied, and that being the talented one was rarely something that women were called, or being the skillful one. It was some other much more superficial presentation, and and also the idea that somehow, well, she is, again, it's a gift. And I think it's true. I think that there were gifts that were given. It's like,
yeah, definitely.
I'm not given grace at birth. I knock into everything. Things are on the floor. I am not, I was prima ballerina was never anything I was going to go for. I did get, I think, a sense of humor. And so that was a mitigating factor. But it's sort of, for a lot of these women, and especially ones who came through even before our time, they really had to take one of these identities and could not show that those boundaries were at all permeable or flexible. So if you were the good woman, you could not, make eyes at somebody on the side. Then you were to be Anne Boleyn and you were going to be beheaded. So I mean, there weren't that many options, and so there were a lot of people auditioning, but an even smaller cast that these women could.
Oh, and you're quite right. The narrow range that is accorded to women, not only is there no middle, in other words, you're not allowed to be yourself, but you really, unless you are Mother Teresa, you are Lizzie Borden. You are really. We talk about the Madonna whore complex.
Right.
This is sort of an echo of that. That you either have to be perfect or you're terrible all the way.
Right. Absolutely, no, it's very good.
Two things, Gina. Number one, Joan Rivers thought you were funny, so there's that. Don't worry about that. You are
funnier than she was. She said.
Yeah. The second thing, though, is now that I'm going to lay a psychological thing here on you. I've been thinking about this for a couple of minutes, and I've decided to go ahead and do it. A couple of the essays are about women who were perceived by the writers as portraying somebody that they would like to be. Yeah. There's a letter to Jane Lynch that starts it off. Toward the very end, there is an essay about Diana Rigg.
Right.
Now, these people are seeing these actors in a role and saying, gee, I wish I could accomplish that. What do you think you would find out if you asked the actors about those roles and how they were portraying somebody that may not be them? In other words, how many layers are we going on this?
No, that's a great question. And with Esther Cohen wrote the piece on Diana Rigg.
Yes.
Of course, yeah. Esther and I went to college together, so we're exactly the same age. And I mean, I also grew up worshiping at the altar of Diana Rigg in the Avengers, right? In the Avengers.
Yeah. And I grew up drooling at the altar of Diana Rigg.
Absolutely unfair. Yeah. Diana Rigg was unfair. That was unfair to happen.
But go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
We got too many gifts, but in fact, she was one of the few roles where Mrs. Peel could be, ferociously, fiercely sexy and absolutely serene and low key. And if you were projecting desire onto her, honey, that's your issue. Or she was a darling, that's your issue. It's not that she's shrugging a shoulder. She's just putting on that latex outfit with the high heels.
Oh,
But then she goes on she is one of the central core members of the Royal Shakespeare Company in London. And then she comes back in her, thank God you could see somebody in their old age, in the Game of Thrones.
Yes.
And so that we see her in all of these incarnations. And what Esther is talking about is looking at the characters. Esther was a theater major and has worked in the theater for a very long time, and talking about the ability for a great actor, for an artist, to pour themselves into the vessel that is best for them. And so that there's a self that's poured into the shape, and they have to take the shape of that. But because all of these essays had to be around the same shape. I wasn't, all of these books, everybody is got the same platform. Everybody's got the same 750 words, around it. Right. And so, imagine me telling Jane Smiley, Jane, you're over. But
oh my goodness.
I mean, this is not, but again, Jane Smiley starts the book, as you guys read, saying that she wants Jane Lynch to play her.
Yes.
And again, that it's, because they're both named Jane, she thinks she could do the accent. They're both tall.
They're both tall. Yeah.
Both tall. And Jane Smiley is just so, just makes those 750 words this appeal, saying
so good.
But it's like, then the idea of Caroline Levitt, who's a New York Times bestselling novelist, has a conversation. So Jane Smiley writes the letter to Jane Lynch, but Caroline Levitt was just, again, her latest book was just on the New York Times, became a New York Times bestseller, and she's working on the next one. And she does a wonderful podcast, by the way, if I'm allowed to mention it on the podcast, called Mighty Blaze.
Oh, go ahead. Say what it is again. What's the title?
Mighty Blaze. Mighty, like Mighty Mouse, and Blaze, BLAZE.
Thank you.
And she interviews writers, mostly women writers, and talking about writing and creativity and work. She's very funny. And again, like you got very generous in terms of opening up conversations for people. And but Caroline imagines an interview with Fanny Bryce. The original
Terrific, yes.
And wants to ask the question that everybody who is not tall and blonde and has, Pepsodent teeth that you could read a book by the light of, that, not that I'm bitter, but she wants to know, are women who are funny, I mean, she's asking this nicely in this imagined conversation with Fanny Bryce, is it like, are women who are not pretty, is that why you become funny? Is it because you're a funny girl because you're not pretty girl, you're not sweet girl, you're not majestic girl, so it'd be called funny girl because you have to create your own category because you don't fit into the other categories. And so a lot of the writers here take, like Queen Maeve, that they take the images that we have of women and say, they ask the question again, how did you become this? How did you handle this? What did you do with it? What did your family think of you? Are there regrets? People ask, why do you have any regrets about this? Like in the Marilyn Monroe case,
oh yeah,
Judah Burrell writing about a young writer who has had troubles that she talks about, writing to Sylvia Plath.
Yeah.
Like, how did you decide like that day you couldn't go on anymore?
Yes.
Right.
So a lot of them are funny, but I would say that all of them have, again, they're starters for conversation in the way that sourdough is the starter for sourdough. Like,
yes.
You need something to get things going. And so I figured that this, this collection will, my dream for it is so that it'll start conversations, but that everybody can have fun reading this, and it counts as like getting an education. I feel like I could give people continuing education credits if they read the book. Give them.
I was just going to say that it's so full of delights, and you meet so many people that maybe you don't know very much about, and that's probably a mistake of our culture that we don't know more about Fay Weldon, or Margaret of Navarre, I love it. I have to tell you, I love it when the interlocutor says to her, so what do you say about this notion that you single-handedly invented troubadour poetry? Wow.
But people want to know. It's what the
Yes.
inquiring minds want to know.
It's what you're going to ask if she's in your bedroom. Yeah.
Right.
Plus, you're right. There is a lot of education in there. There's an essay about the woman who was the librarian in Los Angeles.
Right. Yes, Nicole Caterino.
So great. So
Yeah.
good.
And the fact that when they renovated she was in the 1800s when they renovated the building in 1968, I guess.
Right.
They dedicated a room to her, and then the next time the building was renovated, that room was gone, and her name is completely vanished.
Right,
which is terrible.
No, but it's again that what does fame do? It goes in waves.
Right.
Even in itself, that you have the idea that it's supposed to make you immortal, and that's not even if you achieve it in your lifetime. I mean, you don't get to say what that is. But I love the idea that, thank you for bringing up both Joan Rivers and Faye Weldon. Faye Weldon was an author a couple of years ago. She was my fairy godmother. I didn't know her. I just knew her work. And when I decided, I'd had a couple of different jobs. I had gone to different places. And I decided finally to do my PhD at the City University of New York. And which was on 42nd Street, which is where my family thought I was going to end up. So it was perfect. And but I wrote to Faye Weldon I loved her novels when I lived in England. I was a student at Cambridge University, and I came across her just by chance. And her books were everywhere in the 80s. And I wrote her through a publisher saying, dear Miss Weldon, I doubt this will ever reach you or something. This was on airmail paper. Remember the airmail?
Of course, the little tissuey. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So it was like onion skin.
You can still get it. You can still send an airmail letter. You can.
But why would you, John?
Well, no, because I like to drive people crazy by forcing them to try to open one of those things.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Or drive somebody crazy by trying to write on it without poking through the paper with your pen. Anyway, go ahead.
Back to our guest.
But so I wrote to Faye and really expected nothing. And I said, this is not to ask for permission. I said, this is just, I will not be asking to dig up your manuscripts, that you buried in the yard. I just want to let you know I'm embarking on this project. And about 3 weeks later, to my astonishment, I'm living on the Lower East Side. I'm in a basement apartment. I'm living on nothing. And I get this airmail envelope back. And I still have the letter. And it said, Dear Gina Barreca, by all means, dig up the garden. You can keep the manuscripts. We shall plant bulbs. And I was like, oh my God. And so I was teaching as an adjunct at Queens College. I was going to school. And I invited her. They had money for speakers in those days. And she had never done a reading in the States. And her publishers and her agent said she doesn't have that big an audience, a U.S. audience. And I was like, I can show you differently. And that's where I learned to send stuff out because it was on Faye's behalf. It was much easier, although there were, again, skills I then used when my own book started to come out. And Faye was always really proud to blurb them. She really was my fairy godmother. And we packed the 350-person auditorium at Queens College. There were people standing outside to get in. She wrote the opening episodes of Upstairs, Downstairs.
Right. I think, didn't she write Letters to Alice? Didn't she? I mean,
Alice and Life. She wrote Life and Loves of a She-Devil.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
It's a terrible movie, but and that Faye actually asked me when they're making the film in New York, and she said, Gina, I signed a contract, and it says in the contract that I cannot make any comments about the casting or the direction of the film because they have bought the property. And I can't say that, but I've been asked by the Times of London to sort of give my opinion on what it's like to have my book adapted by a major American studio. And she said, what can I say that will not make them take the money back? And I said, you could say what Oscar Wilde said, because he wasn't allowed on the set of The Importance of Being Earnest while it was in rehearsal because he would make too many comments and want too many changes. So he was there in the opening night and the director went up to him and said, so Oscar, what do you think? And he said, oh, it's marvelous. It reminds me of something I once wrote. Because that just, there's no liability there. I mean, and
that's right.
Yeah, that's the old Groucho Marx joke where where the George S. Kaufman was standing in the wings while the Marx Brothers were doing one of his plays, and he was talking to another man, and he shushed the other man when the other man was in the middle of a sentence, and the man said, "What's the matter?" And he goes, "I think I just heard one of my lines."
Great. Yeah, it's exactly.
So I just want to agree with you about Faye. I had the privilege of interviewing her in the early '90s, and when her star was at its zenith, and just a piquant, wise, very incisive conversation, and she's that kind of person who is at once everywhere and also sort of below the radar, especially in this country, except she really, she's that thing that we've been talking about the woman who's famous and sort of people start treating her like, well, of course she's famous, you know.
Right.
You know.
No, that was always it. I mean, she, again, she gave me away at my wedding, my second wedding, which is
that is so great.
I mean, she came over, she got the New York Times to get her to write about Anita Hill. And so she said, "I'm coming over, I'll be at the wedding, and I'm writing about Anita Hill." So we're having a pizza the night before with the gang of people who were still putting up, curtains in the house and getting the house ready. And we're talking about this. She said, "So tell me, what do you think about Anita Hill?" And she's taking notes while we're drinking wine and eating pizza. And because she was a real writer, she wrote about everything. But then when she got divorced from her second marriage, Weldon, the paparazzi started hanging out like outside her apartment door in London. They started asking, wildly inappropriate and personal questions. They really violated her sense of space. And so that she had to sort of mark herself. She started wearing, not quite like Marilyn Monroe, but she started wearing, like the Queen, the big headscarves and glasses. And this is not, as you said, you met Faye. This was the most unassuming woman in the world. This was a very humble and generous and sweetheart of a woman. But she started to make headlines because her husband was divorcing her, and he was suing her for alimony, which he got, and then dropped dead the day the divorce became final.
There is a God.
How considerate of him.
Yes. And everything that Faye said about writing her novels is that people would say, this kind of thing doesn't happen.
Yeah.
She said, "I don't invent. I'm really a journalist."
That's right. I'm just taking dictation.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So the book, ladies and gentlemen, is Fast, Famous Women. It's not just one good read. It's 75 really good reads. Our guest, and I hope she'll come back, it has been Gina Barreca. Gina, is this the last of the Fast Women series? What do you think?
Okay, now this is the question that I'm trying to cope with now, because I've got actually another book coming back in the fall. I've got another book coming out called Gina School. And this is an illustrated volume. So there are what I learned about life over all these years, and then this brilliant young man who.
And it's this most glittering 10 pages, ladies and gentlemen. You have to buy.
So if you always wanted to learn how to be Gina, you can do it.
Absolutely, but or what not to do. What I have learned not to do, which allows me to wake up in the morning, to keep a job, all the things that it's like nobody would have thunk this when I first started. But so we'll see. It's been a lot of work, and this is, with this year, I just want literacy not to go away. I want books to be read. I want people to keep adding their voices, especially people from the margins, who are not just foolishly making pronouncements and saying that what they know is all intuitive. That this is, that people who have sort of done their homework, have been thoughtful, like you two gentlemen, who have, make people feel like ideas are important, they're worth talking about and worth getting involved.
Well, it's such a wonderful pleasure. It's always a gift to have you aboard, and I hope that you will come back soon to have another sit down, because you're having a book every 3 weeks, and I think it'll be easy to do that. But no, we want to have you when the illustrated Gina comes out, because Thank you very much, Gina Barreca. Have a wonderful time, and go out and get that book, folks. Fast, Famous Women.
Definitely.
Thank you, my friends. See you soon. Bye.
And thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube.
Hey, let us know how we're doing. Send us an email at musicalinnertube, all one word, @gmail.com.
Do you know someone with a great story to tell? Let us know. Send us an email or log in to our website, musicalinnertube.com, and click on the microphone in the lower right-hand corner to leave us a voicemail.
And while you're on our website, take a few minutes to listen to past episodes of the podcast. They're all there, along with pictures and biographies of our guests, blog posts, and lots more.
And as always, our thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for providing us with our theme music.